Good afternoon. I expect some of you will be wondering what I've been doing, as I haven't been posting things for a few years. Well, I had to take a break. I put up some of what I wanted to put up, and I've also been busy on other projects. One of which is actually writing a book on slavery. Now, I've written this book, The Global Campaign, in 1 and 2 volumes. It comes from my research, my own personal research, as a volunteer worker at the former Empire and Commonwealth Museum here in Bristol. Now, the Empire and Commonwealth Museum was set up back in the 90s, and it was to be a museum of the former British Empire and the Commonwealth. And they inherited an archive of blue books and diplomatic papers from the former Commonwealth Institute, and they wanted a volunteer to produce a database of summaries. So I was busy there working as a volunteer from I think the mid-90s to the early part of to about 2003 in the archive, producing a summary of these fascinating documents. They really were. Now I produced these summaries, and it was clear going through them that when the British state moved against slavery in the 19th century and tried to legislate against it, they didn't just do it in the British Caribbean. Slavery was throughout the empire. It was at what was then Cape Colony, which is now South Africa. It was also it also involved Sierra Leone, which was founded in around about 1790 as a homeland for freed slaves. It was also in Mauritius and the Seychelles, which we had taken over from the French during the Napoleonic Wars, and also we had to and also it was in India and Ceylon. And as the British Empire expanded, we were confronted with other forms of slavery, like when Sir Stamford Raffles founded Singapore. He was also involved in Java and setting up a colony in Java there, and so he was confronted with Javanese slavery, which he claimed he was trying to extinguish. Others have cast real doubt on that, and this is one of the topics mentioned in the books. It was also at Perak, and new forms of slavery and exploitation also appeared as the British Empire expanded, for example, into the Pacific. As we did so, the indigenous peoples of the Pacific Islands were enslaved. It was called blackbirding, and they were taken over as slaves under the guise of being indentured servants and indentured workers for sugar plantations in Fiji and in Queensland in Australia. And this meant that British authorities and abolitionists also had to move and try to stamp out that. There was, after the abolition of slavery, the British, our government, tried to replace slave labour with that of indentured Indian and Chinese workers. And they were treated little better than slaves. It really was horrendous. and this was known as the coolie trade. And again, once again, the British government and the imperial authorities had to step in there and pass legislation to end it, or at least regulate it so that regulate it out of existence. Also, as Britain expanded into Africa, like at the Gold Coast, there were British campaigns to conquer the surrounding areas. Part of the justification for which is that we were attacking the indigenous slaving states in West Africa, like Badagry and Dahomey, and as well as Ashanti, great African warrior nation. In West Africa, in Central and West Africa, again, in what is now Tanzania and Malawi, and what is now Zambia, again, the justification for taking over these countries was to prevent the enslavement and trade in indigenous African peoples and their export to British India, which was concerning the British, the Raj authorities over there, and also, their export to the Middle East and further afield. Also, there were concerns about the enslavement of indigenous Africans by the British imperial authorities, by the Turkish Empire, and we and the Khedive Ismail, who was the ruler of Egypt, sent expeditions further south in the Sudan to try and root out the slave trade there and the enslavement of Africans. It was truly a colonial effort. Not a colonial, it was truly an imperial effort right across the globe. And that's why I called it the Global Campaign. Now, I'm very, very cognizant that so much of this suffering was caused by us, by Europeans, and the creation of transatlantic slavery in the Caribbean, as well as North America. Interestingly, the book also deals with this. One of the first English-speaking countries to abolish slavery were the Canadians, and it was done by very enlightened judges and governors who twisted imperial British Canadian law to say that no, slavery was not recognised in Canada. Absolutely extraordinary, and yes, an amazing achievement. Now, I decided to write the book because what I found was that the majority of books tend to deal with Caribbean and North American slavery, and they tend to deal with them in isolation. There are also very many excellent books which deal with slavery as a global phenomenon, not just in North America, but also in various countries around the world. However, I had come across no book that dealt with slavery specifically within its context of British imperial politics and the British Empire, and that I felt needed to be addressed. And so I wrote this book. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find a mainstream publisher, so it's self-published with Lulu. I'll put up the address, I'll put up their address so that if anyone's interested, you can order it directly from them. The book costs £12 exclusive of VAT for both volumes. So, that's what I've been working on. If you're interested, you can order it from Lulu. Thank you for listening.